The night before the trip. The night before the trip, I received a message. Just 6 words. Just don't fall in love with me. The sender was Preston. I stared at my phone screen for a long time, then laughed. Idiot. I replied immediately. Relax. I like women. 3 dots appeared, then vanished. Appeared again. Finally, he sent a single thumbs-up emoji. What I didn't know then was that we were both lying. If you ask me now whether this is a love story, a coming-of-age story, or a story about a road trip, I'd tell you, it started with a stupid bet. My name is Orlando. I was born in Portland, raised in a family as ordinary as millions of other American families. Dad was an electrical engineer. Mom was an elementary school teacher. My life had always been clearly mapped out. Study, graduate, get a job, start a family. Simple as that. Until the day I walked through the doors of a university and met Preston Walker. If I'm the kind of person who always stays in his lane, Preston was like a convertible flying down the highway with the music at full blast and the windows down in the dead of winter. He lived by inspiration. I lived by plans. We shouldn't have become friends. But life has always had a strange sense of humor. First day of college. The atrium of the business and design building was packed with freshmen. The sound of rolling suitcases on tile floors, parents giving last-minute advice, loudspeakers continuously calling out registration zones. I was in line waiting to pick up my student ID when something crashed behind me. Thud. A cup of coffee poured directly onto my brand new white sneakers. Oh no! A deeply apologetic male voice rang out. I'm so sorry. I looked down at my shoes, now blotched with brown. Great. First time wearing them. I looked up. Standing before me was a tall guy with slightly curly brown hair, wearing a gray hoodie, still holding a coffee cup that was now half empty. The strange thing was, instead of looking at my shoes, he was looking straight at my face. For about 3 seconds, as though he'd just forgotten what he was about to say.
I'm sorry.
He repeated himself. I just ruined your shoes. I'll live. I'll buy you a new pair. That's not necessary. I mean it. Really, it's fine. I feel like it is necessary. I let out a laugh. First time meeting someone and you're already trying to buy my silence? He laughed too. If that's what it takes. The first time I saw Preston, what I remembered most wasn't his looks. It was his eyes. He had eyes that smiled. The kind of person whose mere presence made the air around him feel a little lighter.
I'm Preston.
Orlando. All right, Orlando. Preston held out his phone. At least give me your number, so I can pay you back for the shoes. I think you're just looking for an excuse. You're right. He answered so fast I was caught off guard. I am looking for an excuse. 3 weeks later, we were friends. 3 months later, everyone at school thought we'd known each other since high school. 6 months later, our friends had given us a shared name. Travel Brothers. The reason was simple. We disappeared every weekend. Sometimes we'd drive 3 hours just to watch the sunrise on a mountain. Sometimes we'd take a ferry to a small island because one of us had read about it online. Sometimes we'd hike more than 20 kilometers through a national park and come home at night to collapse on the floor, laughing like 2 idiots. We took thousands of photos, ate at roadside diners, collected fridge magnets from every place we visited, wrote the names of each destination on a large map pinned to the wall of our apartment. But there was one rule, one that Preston himself had set. We don't fall in love with each other. I thought he was joking. Preston was completely serious. If we're just friends, every trip will always be fun. If one of us develops feelings for the other, it's over. I laughed. You think too much. Just promise me. Fine. I promise. Preston held out his pinky finger. I promise too. We hooked fingers like little kids. Neither of us knew. We had just made the hardest promise we'd ever have to keep. Freshman year ended faster than I expected. Summer arrived. Everyone went home. Preston and I decided to stay in Seattle and work. Days spent at our jobs. Evenings spent exploring the city. One night at the end of July, after a shift at a coffee shop, Preston brought 2 cans of beer up to the rooftop of the student apartment complex. Seattle at night was strangely beautiful. The wind carried the smell of the sea. Lit windows stretched all the way to the skyline. "Can I ask you something real?" Preston suddenly spoke. "Sure. Have you ever liked someone?" I was quiet. "Yeah. A girlfriend." "Once." That was actually a lie. I had once liked a guy in my high school class. I just never dared to admit it. Preston nodded. "I haven't. Not once."
No.
"Why?" He shrugged. "I always figured, when I meet the right person, I'll know immediately." I laughed. "Sounds like a movie." "Maybe." Preston looked out at the city. "Maybe that person is closer than I think." My heart skipped a beat. Not because of what he said, but because when he said it, Preston wasn't looking at the city. He was looking at me, for a long time, until both of us grew flustered and turned away at the same moment. That was the first time I felt it, that the friendship between us was quietly stepping past a line neither of us had dared to name. And from that moment on, I began to understand why Preston had set that strange rule from the very beginning. Maybe he was scared too. Scared that one day, 2 people who only meant to be each other's travel companions might accidentally become each other's final destination. Everything truly began at the start of sophomore year. Not in a classroom, not in a dorm room, not even on a trip, but during an evening when a group of friends sat eating pizza after class. About 10 of us were crammed into Ethan's off-campus apartment. The TV was showing a football game, but nobody was really watching. Some people were fighting over the last slice of pizza, others were playing on a Switch, others were swapping ridiculous stories about professors. Preston sat beside me, as always. It had become a habit. Nobody arranged it. Nobody noticed. We just always instinctively chose the seat next to each other. "Hey!" Ethan suddenly slapped his hand on the table. "Spring break this year. Let's actually go somewhere." Everyone immediately chimed in.
Las Vegas. No.
"Miami. Too expensive." "Yellowstone. Been there." Ideas kept being thrown out and shot down. Finally, our friend Hannah pulled up Google Maps. "What about Olympic National Park?" Everyone nodded at once. Beautiful scenery, reasonable cost, and not too far from Seattle. "That works. I'm in." "Done." Preston turned to look at me. "Orlando. I'm in." "Perfect." He smiled so brightly, like I just agreed to something far more significant than a road trip. Over the next 3 weeks, everyone was busy preparing, renting cars, booking a cabin, buying food, planning the route. While everyone else argued about which road to take, Preston was hunched over an Excel spreadsheet. I glanced at his laptop screen. "What are you doing?" "Budget." "I thought you hated planning." "Depends." "On what?" Preston didn't look up. "If I'm going with other people, I like to be spontaneous. But if I'm going with you," he paused, "I want everything to be perfect." I couldn't explain it. Such an ordinary sentence, yet it left me quiet for a long time. Departure day. 2 SUVs carrying 8 people left Seattle at 6 in the morning. I sat in the passenger seat. Preston drove. Soft indie music played quietly. The sun slowly rose above the mountain range. "Coffee?" Preston asked. "Thanks." He had remembered exactly how I liked it.
No sugar.
"Oat milk." Even I sometimes forgot. "I've noticed something," I said. "What?" "You remember everything about me." Preston smiled. "I remember everything about my friends." "Really?" For the first time since we'd met, Preston didn't answer right away. He just looked at the road ahead, then changed the subject. "We should get there around 11. I didn't push further. Olympic National Park was more beautiful than any photo I'd ever seen. Towering pines, cool, crisp air, trails blanketed in fallen leaves, the sound of a stream blending with birdsong. After checking into the cabin, the group decided to hike to a lake deep in the forest. The trail wasn't too difficult, but it took nearly 2 hours. When we arrived, everyone fell silent. The lake was so clear it reflected the entire sky. Hannah shrieked, "Photos!" and then everyone was laughing and running in every direction. Some skipped stones across the water. Some set up a drone. I took out my camera. I was adjusting the lens when Preston walked over. "Can you take one of me?" "Sure. I'll take one of you too." We took turns standing in front of the lake. Then Preston looked at the photo he'd just taken. "Beautiful. The scenery is." I wasn't talking about the scenery. My heart stopped. Preston was still looking at the camera screen, as though he hadn't realized what he'd just said. Or maybe he had. That evening, the whole group built a campfire in front of the cabin. Some roasted marshmallows. Some played guitar. Some told ghost stories. Around midnight, everyone drifted off to bed. Only Preston and I remained. The fire had burned low. The silence was so complete all we could hear was the soft crackling of embers. "I love moments like this," Preston said softly.
No phones. No assignments. No deadlines.
"Just nature." I nodded. "And a best friend." He smiled. "Yeah." A while later, Preston asked out of nowhere, "Orlando. If you could live anywhere after graduation, where would you go?" "I'm not sure yet. Maybe New York. Maybe back to Portland." "What about you?" Preston stared into the flames. "I want to travel. A lot. See all of America. And if there's someone patient enough." He smiled, barely. "I'd take them with me." I glanced at Preston's profile. The firelight caught his nose, his deep blue eyes. For the first time in my life, I had a thought I immediately wanted to erase. "I want that person to be me." Came like a flash of lightning. But it was enough to keep me awake all night. Because from that moment, I could no longer pretend to myself that Preston was just a friend. And what scared me even more was that sometimes, in the moments when Preston looked at me with an inexplicably tender gaze, I began to wonder, was I really the only one hiding a secret? The next morning, I was the first one awake. Not because of an alarm, but because I'd barely slept at all. I lay on the bunk bed in the cabin, staring at the wooden ceiling for hours, forcing myself to believe that what I'd felt the night before was temporary. Just the scenery being too beautiful, the air too peaceful. People are easily moved in moments like that. I repeated that reasoning until I almost believed it myself. Until I walked downstairs to the kitchen. Preston was already there. He was wearing a dark blue hoodie, his hair slightly damp from washing his face. 2 steaming mugs of coffee sat on the table. "Morning," he smiled. "Knew you'd be up early." "How?" "Because whenever something's on your mind, you can't sleep." I froze. "How do you know that?" Preston shrugged. "Because I know." That was always his answer.
No explanation. No fanfare.
As if understanding me was simply a given. "Your coffee." He slid the mug toward me.
No sugar.
"Oat milk." I took it, and suddenly felt that the distance between us was more dangerous than I'd ever realized. A person can only remember every small habit of another person when they truly pay attention. Or, I didn't let myself finish the thought. After breakfast, the group decided to go kayaking on the lake. Preston and I naturally ended up in the same kayak. "These two don't even need to draw straws," Ethan laughed. "They're always glued together anyway. Saves time," Hannah added. I just smiled it off. Preston calmly dragged the kayak to the water's edge. "Let's go." The lake's surface was smooth as a mirror. Our paddles left small ripples spreading outward. After about 20 minutes, the group gradually drifted apart. Preston and I paddled to a quiet corner of the lake. Neither of us spoke. Just the sound of water and birdsong echoing from the pine forest. "You know," Preston said softly, "I like the quiet when I'm with you." I turned to look at him. "You usually never stop talking." "True," he smiled. "But around you, I don't feel like I need to say much. I don't feel awkward either. Just sitting like this is enough." My heart started beating faster again. I realized the most frightening thing wasn't what Preston said. It was how he said it. So naturally, as if it were simply a fact. That afternoon, the group returned to the cabin to pack up and head back to Seattle. While everyone was carrying their luggage to the cars, I discovered my camera had gone missing. I left it right on the table. Did you look carefully? Emily asked. Yes. I'll help. Everyone split up to search the cabin. 10 minutes. 20 minutes. Still nothing. Wait. I remember, Preston suddenly said. You were taking photos at the wooden dock this morning. You might have left it there. I'll go back and get it. I'll come with you.
No.
He shook his head. Everyone else get ready to leave. Just 15 minutes. And then he was running down the trail. The sky had started to cloud over. I watched him go, a strange unease settling in my chest. 20 minutes. 30 minutes. Preston still hadn't come back. The sky darkened. The first drops of rain fell. I'll call him, Ethan said. No answer. No signal. I couldn't wait any longer. I'm going to find him. Hold on. It's about to really pour. I don't care. I grabbed my jacket and ran into the forest. The trail was slippery from the rain. I ran and called Preston's name. No answer. 10 minutes later, I saw him. Preston was standing under a small roof near the wooden dock. My camera in his hand. His clothes almost completely soaked. Orlando. He looked surprised. Why did you come back? I thought something happened to you. Preston looked at me for a few seconds, then burst out laughing. You were that worried about me? Of course. Why? Because... I was about to say, because you're my best friend. But the words caught in my throat. Couldn't lie anymore. Not even to myself. Because I don't want to lose you. The space went completely silent. The sound of rain on the wooden roof was all there was. Preston stopped laughing. He looked at me for a long time. That look made it nearly impossible to breathe. Finally, Preston stepped forward. He placed the camera in my hands. Same. Just one word. But my heart felt like someone had wrapped their hands around it. I don't want to lose you either. We stood very close. Close enough that I could see a few drops of water still clinging to Preston's lashes. A cold gust of wind swept through. On instinct, I reached up and brushed a leaf from his hair. The moment I did it, both of us went still. My hand still rested lightly against Preston's soft hair. And he didn't step back. He just looked at me quietly. The space between us was only a few inches. I had never stood this close to another man. And I knew, if either of us moved even slightly forward, nothing would ever be the same. At that exact moment, found them. Ethan's voice rang out from a distance. Both of us stepped back as if startled awake. Preston cleared his throat. Let's go. Yeah. We walked back side by side. Neither of us mentioned what had just happened. But from that moment on, something had changed. I could no longer lie to myself that any of it was just friendship. And when I glanced over, I caught Preston quietly smiling to himself. A smile that looked exactly like someone who'd just hidden a secret and was hoping the other person was keeping the very same one. The trip ended. But what I felt didn't. Back in Seattle, everything looked the same on the surface. Walking to class together in the mornings. Eating lunch together. Spending evenings at the library. Exploring small corners of the city on weekends. If anything had changed, it was only me. I started noticing things I'd never paid attention to before. Preston always unconsciously walked on the side closer to the street. Every time we entered a coffee shop, he'd order my drink before I even opened my mouth. When it was cold, he always brought a spare jacket because he knew I always underestimated Seattle's weather. If I stayed up late working on an assignment, a hot cup of coffee would appear on my desk the next morning, next to a scrap of paper that read in messy handwriting, "Don't die before finals."
No signature.
But there was no need for one. One afternoon in mid-April, I was in the design studio finishing my final project when my phone buzzed.
Preston, come downstairs.
I texted back. Why? 3 seconds later. Trust me. I sighed, saved my work, and headed down. The moment I stepped outside, I spotted Preston leaning against an old dark green pickup truck with a look of absolute satisfaction. Well, should I know about something? The truck. I see it. I bought it. My eyes went wide. You bought a truck? Used. From my part-time earnings. Preston ran his hand along the hood like he was petting a large dog. Good looking, right? I walked a full circle around it. It wasn't new. There were even a few scratches. But the engine sounded smooth. Yeah, good looking. I think so too. Preston grinned. Did you name it? We have to name it? Obviously. I thought for a moment. Blue. Blue. Yeah. That's it. I'm studying design, not literature. Preston laughed so loudly that a few passing students stopped to look. Perfect. Welcome to the Team Blue. That afternoon, Preston drove me along Alki Beach. Windows down. Sea air pouring into the cab. Our favorite indie songs playing through the old speakers. I have an idea, Preston said, eyes on the road. What? From now on, we go somewhere new every month. Doesn't matter how far. As long as we've never been. Okay. We take one photo at every place. Okay. And by the time we graduate, Preston smiled, we'll have a whole wall of memories. I looked at his face in profile. The late afternoon light came through the window and fell across his lashes in pale gold. And I thought, maybe what I wanted to hold onto wasn't the places we visited, but the person sitting beside me. That plan lasted for more than a year. One trip every month. Sometimes just a small town an hour outside Seattle. Sometimes the coastal roads along Oregon. Once we slept in a tent in the middle of a forest because Preston had booked the hotel on the wrong date. Once the truck broke down on the highway and we sat waiting for a tow truck for 4 hours, laughing until our stomachs hurt because Preston had dropped his burrito on the ground right when he was absolutely starving. College life was busy, but those trips were the quiet spaces both of us always tried to protect. No need for a crowd, just the two of us. Gradually, it became too natural. So natural that our friends started teasing us about it. One evening after class, the whole group gathered at the usual burger place near campus. Hannah looked at me with a grin. Can I ask something? Every time we invite you to somewhere, you say you're busy. But every weekend there are photos of you together? Ethan jumped in immediately. I've been suspicious. Of what? Your friendship. I was mid-sip and nearly choked. What are you talking about? Just look. Ethan started counting on his fingers. You eat together. Study together. Hit the gym together. Travel together. Buy each other birthday gifts. Go to the grocery store together. Honest question. Is there anything you two don't do together? The whole table erupted. I looked over at Preston, flustered. What surprised me was, he wasn't laughing. Preston just rested his chin on his hand and answered calmly. There is. One thing. Marry each other. Silence for exactly 2 seconds. Then the table collapsed into laughter. This guy is too funny. Almost believed him. Classic Preston. I was the only one who couldn't laugh. Because when he said it, Preston had been looking straight into my eyes. For longer than any joke required. That night I barely slept. I opened my phone and scrolled through hundreds of photos of the two of us. Mountains, beaches, coffee shops, candid shots, selfies. There was something I'd never noticed before. In every single photo, Preston was looking at me. Not the camera. Not the scenery. Me. I zoomed in on each one. The more I looked, the faster my heart beat. Was I imagining things? Or had that gaze never belonged to just a friend? Right then, my phone buzzed. It was Preston. Free tomorrow? I replied. After 3. The next message came almost instantly. I want to take you somewhere. I smiled. Another road trip? Yeah. Anything special? This time, Preston took nearly a minute to respond. Finally, a short line appeared on the screen. Maybe, after tomorrow, things between us won't be the same. I read it once, twice, 10 times. My heart started beating so hard I could hear it. I didn't know what Preston meant, but something in me already knew. Tomorrow's trip wouldn't just be a trip. Could be a beginning. Or it could be the end of the most beautiful friendship I'd ever had. And for the first time since meeting Preston, I was truly afraid to know the answer. I barely slept that night. My phone sat on the bed, the screen long dark, but Preston's last message kept replaying in my head. Maybe, after tomorrow, things between us won't be the same. There were a dozen ways to read that. Maybe Preston was transferring schools. Maybe he'd gotten an internship in another state. Maybe he wanted to introduce a girlfriend. Or, I didn't let myself go to the last possibility. The one my heart was simultaneously longing for and terrified of. At exactly 3 the next afternoon, Preston pulled Blue up in front of the dormitory. I walked out with a small backpack. That's all you're bringing? You said it was a day trip. Yeah. We might be back late. I brought a jacket. Smart. He smiled. I'm still working on worrying about you less. How's that going? Not great. I laughed. That was the thing I loved most about Preston. No matter how tense the air between us felt, he always knew how to make me smile. The truck left Seattle, heading east. I checked the road signs. You're not going to the beach?
No.
The mountains?
No.
Then where? You'll see. Preston just smiled. For nearly 2 hours, he didn't say a word about where we were going. We listened to music, talked about assignments, traded stupid stories, exactly like every trip before, except for one thing. Both of us were carefully hiding how nervous we were. Around 5 in the afternoon, Blue stopped in front of a wide hillside overlooking a valley. Hardly any tourists, just a small dirt road winding up to the top. Where did you even find this place? By chance. Preston pulled a picnic blanket from the trunk. I came here once last year, and thought, someday I'll bring the most important person in my life here. I stopped walking. The most important person? Preston didn't answer right away. He just kept walking forward. I followed quietly. The wind at the top of the hill was strong. In the distance, a green valley stretched all the way to where mountain ridges met the horizon. The sun was beginning to sink toward orange. Breathtakingly beautiful. I get it now, I said softly. What? Why you didn't tell me beforehand? If you had, it would have felt different. Preston nodded. Exactly. We sat down on the blanket. Between us were 2 sandwiches bought on the road and 2 cans of soda. Simple like every picnic before, but we both ate very slowly, as if trying to stretch the moment. Finally, Preston spoke first. Orlando. I stared at him. What? Not the spilling. I mean, I was trying to start a conversation. I saw you standing alone from across the room. I was going to walk over and introduce myself, but I got so nervous I accidentally knocked over my coffee. I burst out laughing. Don't tell me. Yeah. Preston laughed along. I really was an idiot. Slowly, the smile faded from his face. Orlando, can I ask you something? Go ahead. Have you ever thought about, what if we hadn't met that day? I looked out at the valley. Yeah. And, I think, my life would have been a lot lonelier. Preston smiled softly. Same. A gust of wind moved through. The edge of the picnic blanket rippled. No one said anything more, but the silence wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like both of us were waiting for the other to gather enough courage to take one more step. The sun touched the horizon. The entire sky was drenched in red-orange light. Preston took a long, slow breath. I once told you, when I meet the right person, I'll know immediately. My palms began to sweat. Remember. I remember. That was a lie. I looked at him. It wasn't immediate. It took me almost a year to realize. Preston's voice was very quiet, but every word was clear. I kept thinking the feeling would go away. I kept reminding myself we were just friends. That, if I said something, I might lose my closest friend. He laughed softly, bitterly. So I came up with that stupid rule. No falling in love. My heart felt like it had stopped. Preston bowed his head, smiling helplessly. Funny, right? The person who made the rule is the one who broke it first. The world went completely quiet. I could hear the wind, my own heartbeat, and Preston's breath, growing slightly unsteady. He looked up. Those blue eyes, for the first time, showed something unmistakable. Fear. Orlando, I like you. Not as a friend. I mean, I love you. I have for a long time. I don't know how you feel. And I don't want to pressure you. If this makes things weird between us, I'll accept that. Just don't disappear from my life. When he finished speaking, the whole world seemed to go silent. I looked at the boy who had walked beside me for nearly 2 years. The one who always remembered how I took my coffee. Who always walked on the street side. Who always had a spare jacket ready. Who was always the first to appear when I needed someone. And I suddenly realized I had fallen in love with Preston without knowing exactly when. Maybe at the lake. Maybe on those long roads. Or maybe from the very moment he spilled coffee on my white shoes. I smiled. Without knowing it, tears had blurred the corners of my eyes. Preston. Yeah. You really are an idiot. His face went slightly pale. Why? Because you made me wait too long. Preston went completely still. I took a slow, deep breath and said what I'd been hiding for nearly 2 years. I love you too. In that moment, Preston's eyes went wide, like he couldn't believe what he'd just heard. And I knew from this second forward, every journey we took would no longer begin with 2 friends.